just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently. And so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look. And without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. So, here I am back, and I'm restarting with a Borg sphere. And we first saw one of these in Star Trek First Contact. And of course, it makes perfect sense. The Borg, being very efficient types, would have both cubes and spheres. And of course, then we see this bizarre sort of diamond-shaped thing. And we do, of course, see a little sort of, what would you call them? Trapezoid-y sort of Borg proby sort of ship. So probably the sort of the baby of the Borg family, really, in terms of Borg ships. But this was first seen First Contact, and apparently they wanted it to be a surprise because we hadn't seen one before, and that's why they had it used almost as a sort of escape pod coming out of a Borg cube. But apparently, that's the only time we've seen them do that with it. Generally speaking, the spheres are supposed to be longer range scout type ships, or sort of, more sort of logistics-y sort of ships, that kind of idea. But that just made me think of Hugh, actually. I'm trying to think what Hugh's ship was, if you remember him from Next Gen, because he can't have been in anything much bigger than a sphere, if a sphere at all, in fact. So anyway, I digress. So the interesting thing about this one, and I hadn't really ever thought about it because I wouldn't have thought to get confused in this fashion, is that apparently there were concerns when they came up with this idea that they wanted to avoid it looking like, wait for it, the Death Star, even though it's only 600 meters wide. It's not the size of a small moon, no. So, that was a bit interesting. But I think there must have been a temptation, almost subliminally, to give it a sort of feature that was like its main weapon sort of feature, which would have made it look like a bit like the Death Star being ripped off. So they had to be a little bit careful. Like all Borg ships, it's got lots and lots of redundancy. It's got tractor beams, it's got cutting beams, it's also got missiles, unusually slightly for a Borg ship. I'm not sure we'd really seen that before, but the general aim of these guys is to lock onto a ship with tractor beams, drain its shields, take chunks out of it if it wants to. But interestingly, one thing that the Borg sphere does, which again I don't think we'd seen before, is it has a tendency to actually want to eat ships. It actually tries to take them into itself in order to properly dissect them and assimilate them. So that was an interesting feature that we didn't see Borg cubes do in the past. But we do see Voyager very nearly, well, in fact, we do see Voyager eaten like that on one occasion, and it attempts to eat Voyager on another occasion. So rather dangerous for the sphere, as it turns out, in most cases, because it basically opens a channel directly into his innards in order to do that, which of course leaves it quite vulnerable, perhaps more vulnerable than it would be otherwise. So, interesting choice of tactic on its part, but they were supposed to be, I think, a bit more throwaway than cubes because of their smaller size. But what this magazine mentions, and it is quite interesting, is that there are a number of vulnerable points in a Borg vessel's design where you can really disrupt it if you can get into it, and if you can hit enough of them, I suppose, because of the redundancy. But there's this, which is a central plexus, which interlinks all the Borg ships and allows each Borg ship to know what each other Borg ship is doing. And then there's also this vinculum, and the vinculum is what kind of binds the minds of the Borg together and quashes individuality. So if that gets taken out on a ship, again, you end up with chaos, because all the Borg suddenly go, what am I doing? Don't know what to do because I can't hear the one voice anymore. So interesting soft spots if you can get in to actually do anything to them in the first place, of course, and that is the trick. As we saw in First Contact, that one was emitting chronoton particles and went time travelling for fun. This goes into Borg assimilation a little bit, this section here, and I was trying to think whether or not in Best of Both Worlds we actually sort of had the idea of nanoprobes being injected into people, whether we only really saw that in First Contact. I'm interested to hear people's thoughts on that, because I remember when Picard originally got kidnapped, he just seemed to get sort of knocked out. There wasn't the tubules bits that we see this poor chap getting injected by there. But they also say as well that the nanoprobes do a certain amount of assimilation, but then they have to get taken to an assimilation room to actually get decapitated or generally sort of amputated to get the new parts fitted. So the nanoprobes can only actually do so much. Is the idea that this magazine is stating. Similarly with things like the eyes, of course, as well. People get these ocular implants put in place of their own eye. It's fairly icky stuff. That's kind of the point. So, it's an interesting sort of breakdown. But this is where it talks about designing the Borg sphere and this idea that it was going to have a sort of a Death Star kind of element to it at one point, and they realise that actually no, hang on, we're walking ourselves into a bit of a trap here because we're going to get accused of ripping off the Death Star basically. But I don't think they would have been. I think science fiction fans, generally speaking, are intelligent enough to realise that it's just a sphere. It just happens to look like that because it's not a cube, and it kind of just works. But it made sense that they would sort of try and avoid that, I suppose, if they can. Various bits here about designing the Borg Queen. I think this has appeared in another one, possibly in the magazine about the Raven. Some of these images are a little bit similar, but it's just kind of the hows and the whys and the sort of contact lenses and all that sort of good stuff that the poor actresses had to put up with to get themselves looking queen-like. But I mean, it is an incredibly sort of heavy-duty kind of prosthetic that they've got to put on. It's not just the prosthetics, it's the actual sort of costume itself as well. Apparently it was deeply uncomfortable. But it was a very, very striking way to introduce a sort of a single voice for the Borg as a whole. It made perfect sense to do it. But of course, again, it gave them a soft spot. Because if you can disrupt her, you can disrupt everything else going, because she doesn't have... I say she doesn't have any redundancy. We do seem to have seen more than one Borg Queen, of course. And let's not go into the whole Star Trek Picard and anyway. So we just mentioned the spheres first seen in Star Trek First Contact, and it does appear in Dark Frontier, and of course it does have some other significant episodes as well where we see them. I don't know, they're also referred to as sort of tactical vessels, but there is a tactical Borg cube as well, which I've looked at. So I don't know where they really sort of fit in terms of firepower overall. I would see them as kind of the Excelsior class of Borg. If the cube's kind of sovereign / galaxy, then I think these guys are more the sort of day-to-day, can punch at their sort of weight size fairly effectively, but aren't anything all that special at the end of the day. So that's that. So let's have a look at the actual model. Now, of course, it does look a little bit like a Terry's chocolate orange, for those who are familiar with the confectionery that is a popular one here in Britain, especially around the festive period. Now available in a variety of flavours, and I'm not being sponsored, so don't get upset. So let's have a look. Now, I'm hoping it's going to be quite careful actually. I can just see a small child picking this up and just sort of thinking, "Oh, ball," and sort of bouncing it around. It's fairly heavy. I think there's a bit of metal in there somewhere, because it's too heavy to be just plastic. But I suspect this is actually going to be easier than the cube was. I seem to remember the cube for some reason, or was it maybe it was the Queen ship actually that was a bit more fiddly to sort of figure out which way it was actually supposed to be propped up. Because I think this is going to be fairly obvious. It's either the top or the bottom, and it probably doesn't matter which way you do it, because it's going to look the same either way. So it's just a teeny tiny little stand for this one, and you just plonk it in there, and that's it. Job's good. So there you have a Borg cube to join the Borg family. And again, it is what it is, and I wouldn't really gone out of my way to get this one, but as it was part of the old job lot still, I thought, yep, okay, well, I have it now, so that's that. But it's quite cool. It's good. It's got a good. Let me show you a little bit. I'll be running it around it in front of you, but not really sort of close up. But you can see it's got a really nice sort of level of detailing to it, and you've got some sort of green highlights, which is fairly standard for a sort of an internal glow from a Borg vessel. So yeah, I mean it's nice. It's nice. It's a lot of detail to it. So fair dues to them for for sort of going to that much trouble to get all that sort of detail in there. So yeah, that's it for this one, and I shall once again start ploughing through the remainder in the over the course of this week. Cheers for now.